Vivian Blake, May 11, 1956 to March 21, 2010. Reputed leader of the notorious Shower Posse, was born to a poor family in West Kingston. He was the recipient of a Marcus Garvey Scholarship while attending St. Anne's Primary School, which granted him access to the then private high school, the prestigious St. George's College. While attending the institution located on North Street in Jamaica's capital, Blake excelled at academics and sports. He first traveled to New York as a part of the cricket team in 1973, but instead of returning to Jamaica, Blake remained, eventually establishing the American arm of the Shower Posse, the entity of death and mayhem that the world ultimately came to know and fear. In the United States, Blake developed marijuana and cocaine distribution networks that spanned throughout major cities which included Miami, New York, Los Angeles, reaching so far north that his operation even encompassed locales like Anchorage, Alaska. Note: in 1981 a Time magazine article reported that an estimated $1 billion was earned annually from illegal drugs, mainly marijuana, shipped or flown into the US from Jamaica. Newsweek magazine at the same time placed the figure at an estimated $1.1 billion. A warrant for his arrest was first issued in 1988 after he and other members of the gang were accused in the November 1984 killing of 5 people in a Miami crack house.
In late 1984, 5 people are executed in a Miami crack house. One, a pregnant woman, is found in a praying position as if pleading for her life. Investigators charged this slaughter was the handiwork of Jamaican posses that killed 1,400 people around the nation during the 4-year investigation.
According to a 2008 profile of the Shower Posse on their BET series American Gangster, Blake escaped arrest and prosecution by hopping aboard a cruise ship in Miami, bound for Jamaica. According to New York Daily News columnist Patrice O'Shaughnessy, in an article printed on March 30, 2010, Blake is credited with the dubious distinction of being one of the creators of crack. According to O'Shaughnessy, during the 1980s Blake was responsible for flooding Bronx neighborhoods such as Soundview, Crotona Park and Bronx River with tons of cocaine and crack cocaine. After escaping apprehension for the multiple homicide case in Miami, and the whole posse fiasco started to hit the fan, with Blake even featured on America's Most Wanted, additional charges came quickly. Charges that included racketeering and conspiracy. His eventual arrest came next, but so too did a lengthy extradition fight, which began in 1994 and culminated in 1999, when he was finally extradited to the United States to face a judge. On what can be described as the dawn of the new millennium, 2000, Vivian Blake pleaded guilty to charges that included the aforementioned, while also admitting his role in the Shower Posse organization. He was sentenced to 28 years, but was released on parole after only serving 8. The accusations of him cooperating with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, have been widespread and numerous, and with good reason, because based strictly on the facts that have been publicized, it seems almost impossible for a man of such caliber and the leader of such an organization, accused and implicated in so many illegal activities, over 1,400 murders, 37 counts of racketeering and conspiracy, and the shipping of over 1,000 tons or over 900,000 kilograms of cocaine, into the United States, a lot of which could be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, should end up with such a light sentence, and then to add insult to injury, only serving 8. Upon his release, Blake returned to Jamaica and was said to be working on a screenplay about his life. Vivian Blake died on the 21st of March, 2010, at the age of 54, after being admitted to the University Hospital of the West Indies for a heart attack. At the time of his death, he was suffering from kidney disease and undergoing dialysis. A very important factor to note regarding Blake is that unlike all his counterparts, the Vivian Blake story is somewhat different. He may have been accused of some major atrocities, and may have even done time for them, but charges aside, the evidence does not support Blake ever being or known as a Chucky, a thug or a bad man. Instead, Vivian was just Vivian, another youth from the inner city who was going to school, enjoyed playing cricket, and from all accounts, played the game well. He was an athlete. However, what must not be overlooked here, for the purpose of complete understanding, is although not one of the rude boys, one of his best friends was Jim Brown. Role models were hard to come by in those days, and there is little doubt that Vivian would have been fascinated by all that Jim was into by the time he was making his exit from Jamaica in 1973. From all accounts, the avenues of communication remained opened, and in short order, business was born out of friendship. Jim orchestrating from a distance, Jamaica, and Vivian handling business on the ground, New York. It didn't take long for Jim's status to rise. Because unlike most who came before him, Jim Brown now had plans that went way beyond the shores of Jamaica and the trappings of politics. Note, Vivian Blake can also be viewed as a godfather to DUDUS in literal terms. This was one of his best friend's sons. And there is little doubt that DUDUS was an early patron of Blake's generosity. Excerpt from an interview before Vivian Blake's demise. Exhibit A. I did 15 years in prison. I've never had a crime in Jamaica. Never had nothing to do with Jamaica and their politics. But they keep mixing me up in politics. I'm a family man. Me commit my crimes them in America, and finish my time. All I want right now is just finish out me life peacefully. I ain't got no time for gun and all them type of things. I am 54 years old. You understand me? I have to be more about checking about my health, more than trying to be a gangster. End of excerpt. Vivian may not have been an angel, but it cannot be denied that he was nothing like his counterparts. He was a criminal, no doubt about that, but he wasn't one who dwelled and thrived off violence. He broke the law to make money. He was a businessman, a man who, besides his dealings in the drug arena, was also known to own and operate several legitimate businesses, inclusive of nightclubs and real estate developments. It has also long been rumored that he was a major financier and silent partner in more than one entity, which has since become a literal beacons of light in the Jamaican tourism industry. There was also interest in the financial industry, where it was said that he had major holdings in one or more loan agencies. Vivian Blake died at the age of 54, on the 21st of March, 2010, after returning to Jamaica just over a year before, in January of 2009, following an 8-year stint in a U.S. federal prison. In life, he was said to be larger than life, celebrated by many. But in death, the mourners were few, as just over 20 persons showed up to pay their last respects, and in what could be viewed as a cinematic twist of irony, the contingent of police officers deployed to the funeral was even greater than the number of mourners in attendance. It must also be noted that there were no notable figures of any sort among the mourners in attendance, neither from the political arena or the underworld. What needs to be noted at this juncture is that by the time of Vivian's death, he was literally ostracized by the people of West Kingston, who viewed him as a turncoat, a Benedict Arnold, a Judas, or in Jamaican terms, an informer, and believed by many to be the main culprit behind the spilling of the beans about their beloved Jim Brown and the Shower Posse. Then again, not many even knew Vivian to begin with. He was just that incognito. And with the stories now being what they were, not many wanted to see him or even be seen with him. Sure, he had his supporters amongst the older gatekeepers, but truth be told, by the time of his death, as important as Vivian Blake was to West Kingston, not too many inside or outside that community cared enough to even mourn his passing. It must also be noted that the Shower Posse was said to be the hand-picked street-level operatives for the Cali Cartel, a drug cartel founded in 1977 and based in southern Colombia, around the city of Cali and the Val del Cauca department. Its founders were the Orejula brothers, Gilberto and Miguel, and Jose Santa Cruz Londono. It is said that the Shower Posse was hand-picked for their penchant for violence. Other notable criminal figures of the era include Push Wood, a JLP enforcer who ruled the community known as Rima, also a JLP-affiliated community. He was the mentor and forerunner to the highly revered, in Jamaican gangster circles, Howard Hewitt, more popularly known as Curly Locks, also a JLP enforcer from the community of Rima, which it is said he ruled with an iron fist for almost a decade. His reign was simultaneous with that of Massop, Mitchell, and Jim Brown. He was known to be involved in daring bank and payroll robberies at various locations across the city of Kingston. Curly Locks was known primarily as the head of the Rima 13 gang, which included some of the most notorious of their day: Bigness, Pearl Harbor, Little Jack, Stella, Mutt, Peasy, 39, Riley, Bob Charles, Danny Banton, and a young and dangerous youth, known only as Crackers. According to police reports of the day, the gang was known to have staged multiple robberies across the city, with each gang member at times brandishing 2 or more guns. Many persons inside and outside of Rima met their deaths at the hands of the Rima 13 gang. Curly Locks was said to be so evil that he was both respected and maybe even a little feared by both his counterparts, Claudius Massop, and his successor, Jim Brown. The stories surrounding his cruelty are numerous, with one of his most evil practices said to be taking people to the roof of the high-rise buildings in Rima, and having them jump to their death. But twisted and demented as that may sound, probably the most evil and deranged incident of his reign was, so it is said, in a jealous rage, Curly Locks was reported to have shot and injured one of his many women over what was said to be argument stemming from his steady advances to her sister, who he actually impregnated 6 months later, only to end her life with a bullet, in her 8th month of pregnancy. His demise came at the hands of a young Tivoli Gardens enforcer, with whom he had a dispute, inside the garrison community. The enforcer in question was known as Paperman. It's reported that he was handling security and had refused Curly Locks entry to a yard where Jim Brown was said to be distributing the weekly checks for community work done in Tivoli Gardens, Rose Town, and Rima. What transpired next arose out of sheer misunderstanding. It has since been ascertained that Paperman did not know that he was dealing with the Rima Don, and had even gone as far as disrespecting him with the derogatory "coolie boy" term, even reportedly threatening to punch him in his mouth, before chasing him away from the entrance to the premises at gunpoint. Reports are that Curly Locks left the scene and returned with a .357 Magnum, and after a brief scuffle, in which he reportedly pistol-whipped Paperman to the stage of near unconsciousness, dislodging his right eye in the process. Eventually Jim Brown and other top Tivoli Gardens enforcers rushed in, diffusing the situation, all the time explaining to Paperman that the coolie boy was in fact the notorious Curly Locks. Only then, and because of their intervention, was Paperman's life spared. But it didn't end there. Some say Curly Locks was ambushed and shot just a few weeks later as he rode his Honda motorbike through West Kingston, while others say that Paperman was the one riding and rode up to Locks on 5th Street and shot him dead, and on his way back to Tivoli, he himself was shot and killed by the police. Either way, one thing is for sure, the triggerman was a one-eyed Paperman. Anthony Tingle, aka General Starkey, People's National Party, PNP, political thug. General Starkey and his crony, Hutch, came to prominence in the unit Jonestown's communities after the death of PNP's top man, Bory Boy and Feathermop in 1975. Interestingly, although on the wrong side of the law, Starkey and Hutch took their names from a popular television crime series of the day, Starsky and Hutch.
Starsky. Hutch. I'm Starsky. He's Hutch.
Featuring protagonists, police detectives, David Starsky and Kenneth Hutchinson. In 1977, Starkey, still a teenager, topped the police most wanted list with a bounty of $3,000 for his capture. At the time, The posting of General Starkey as a most wanted criminal by police was frowned upon by then PNP's youth organization, who issued a statement saying the PNPYO, People's National Party Youth Organization, was extremely disturbed by such a practice. Starkey was 17 years old. Interesting twist. A little over 6 months after going public with that statement, the PNP's disciplinary committee suspended the then PNPYO president, Mr. Paul Burke, a suspension which was said to be based solely on the issuing of such a statement. According to many, including published reports, Burke's suspension was a signal that the inventors of the political monsters had simply had enough of their little creations, and were now authorizing their extermination. Note, 1 year later, in 1978, police killed more than 30 persons who were on their top 40 most wanted list, most of who had some political affiliation. Starkey's running gun battles with legendary crime fighter of the day, Keith Gardner, known in the streets as Trinity, are the type of stuff blockbuster movies are made of. In January of 1978, General Starkey, still wanted, turned himself over to the police and was charged with 2 counts of rape and shooting with intent. But this was Jamaica in the 70s, witnesses seldom ever turned up for such court cases, and with that being the deciding factor, General Starkey was soon back on the streets, as no evidence was ever offered up against him. A year later, in 1979, General Starkey's name was again on the lips of law enforcement, wanted, yet again, for his suspected role and involvement in a series of malicious shootings. With the heat in the kitchen becoming just a little too hot for his liking, Starkey, again a fugitive, fled the island for Canada, where it took him literally no time to get going with what he obviously knew best, criminality. It is said that only 2 days after he arrived, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrested and charged him with 3 counts of attempted murder and other related charges. He was subsequently sentenced by a Toronto court to 4 years imprisonment at hard labor. However, by July of 1980, General Starkey was deported to Jamaica, where he was again faced with the charges he had absconded from, shooting with intent and illegal possession of a firearm. With Starkey returning to the island, and the climate being what it was, politically, it is rumored that he and his gang made some moves out of desperation that caused them to fall out of favor with main elements inside the community, a development that literally forced them to relocate to nearby Jonestown. The dispute that led to General Starkey's expulsion from the community of Annett Gardens, Jungle, is said to have come about due to the murder of a betting shop clerk on Lincoln Crescent in Annett Gardens, in May of 1981. The killing of the woman was said to have not gone down well with some key junglists, who all, in one way or the other, were up in arms against Starkey's gang and the senseless act of violence. Residents who recall the period explained that the body of the betting shop clerk might have still been warm, when a man accused of being involved or known to be part of Starkey's gang, was held and dragged to the scene of the crime and shot dead, execution style. The alleged perpetrator's body was then tagged with a sign that read, "This the killer of the betting shop woman." Shortly after, same day, another man was taken to the scene and also murdered, direct and immediate retaliation by the community, a practice we have now come to know as jungle justice. What goes around, comes around. Just over a month after the betting shop incident, June 21, 1981, Anthony General Starkey Tingle met his Waterloo. The gangster and his cronies are said to have just left to dance in Jonestown on the fateful morning of his death. The word is that most of the gang members were either drunk or high upon retiring to bed. Their guards were down, and in the wee hours of the morning, heavily armed policemen alongside members of the military, who were in the area in search of Starkey and his gang, and who had already gotten credible information on their whereabouts, swooped down on their Jonestown location, at 32 Love Street. According to accounts, the lawmen were met with resistance as soon as they began closing in on the premises. It was reported that they were met with heavy gunfire, but after a lengthy gun battle and the clearing of the smoke, 8 men lay dead, General Starkey and 7 of his cronies, including his brother, Michael McLeod. The other dead men were identified as Barrington Fitzroy and Paul Johnson, both of Septimus Street, Jonestown, Errol Shorter, Conrad Bryan and Leroy Reed of Orange Street, and a man known only as Michael Jackson. The police report at the time stated that they recovered an M16 assault rifle, 80 rounds of ammunition, gas masks and military uniforms. 2 lawmen were reportedly injured during the gun battle. General Starkey was 26 years old at the time of his death. In conclusion, the list of notorious figures and their exploits are literally too many to mention, and their stories filled with too much brutality and at times, too many contradictions, depending on who is recalling the story, or whose evidence is being analyzed. But one thing is for sure. They came, they saw, they terrorized, and they not only set the pace, paving the road traversed by so many since their exit, but maybe even more profound, is that they continue to influence. Gone but never forgotten it seems, by the sons of the garrisons. Zaki the High Priest Lewis, Claudie Massop, Jonathan, Bowie Ork, Bucky Marshall, Byar Mitchell, Burry Boy, Tony Welsh, Feather Mop, Donovan Sink, Copper, Sandercon, Wally Dredd, Peter Cups, Monkey Stubert, Dubal, Dynal, Waxy, Brown Man, Tantuddy, Sexy Paul, Teddy Paul, Ian Masco, Niney, General Starsky, Jim Brown, Jarty, Baskin, Blood, Dust, Danny Banton, Devon Star, Tony Brown, Waterhouse Bunny, Westpick, Vinny, Ozzy, Linaments, Curly Locks, Gold Street, Chubby Dread, Delroy Edwards, Tech Life, Earl Frowser, Natty Kunda, Natty Chris, Waterbugger, Fearbugger, Cow, Early Bird, Jimmy Sport, Claudie Shoe, George Flash, and on goes the list. But regardless what other names may or may not have been brought into the conversation, what is made abundantly clear is that DUDUS was born into a toxic environment with predestined elements. This was the environment, the situations, the people and types of people who were instrumental in one way or the other, when it came to the molding and influencing of his future role. Sure, other children were born the same year he was, even lived in the same area he did, and sure, not all of them turned out like he did, but to those children's benefit, and to DUDUS' detriment. Let's not forget that none of them had a father by the name of Lloyd Lester Jim Brown Koch, and none had the direct influence or association that DUDUS had, from a tender age. Proverbs 26:6. Train up a child in the way he should grow, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Note: controversial as it may be in today's social and political climate, in his honor, an avenue in Tivoli Gardens was officially named after Zaki the High Priest Lewis. Zaki Avenue, one of the earliest known and acknowledged warriors of the political cause. Question: is the Koch family haunted by violence and death? On Tuesday, May 3, 2005, Christopher Chris Royal Koch, 1987 to 2005, was shot and killed by police. His death made him the 4th family member in the Koch dynasty to have met a violent end. The other members include the head of the dynasty himself, Lester Lloyd Jim Brown Koch, who was burnt to death under what some have labeled mysterious or questionable circumstances in 1992, in his Jamaican jail cell, while awaiting extradition to the United States to face multiple murder and drug and gun charges. Then there was Mark Jarty Koch, 1967 to 1992, who was shot along Maxfield Avenue in Kingston, on February 2, 1992, while riding his motorcycle. He was in preparation for an anniversary dance for the fallen area leader, and his father's predecessor, Claudius Massop. Police say at least 12 persons were killed in retaliation within a 2-week period after his murder. The violent end was not only limited to the male members of the dynasty, as there was also the killing of their sister, known only as Mumbai, in 1987. She was also snuffed out by the gun in downtown Kingston. Information surrounding her death is sketchy, but it's alleged that she was sleeping with the enemy, and her demise came about because of who she was, and where she should not have been. However, there has also been talk that she may have actually been taken out by her own. But with no evidence to concur or refute this, that issue remains one of speculation. Note: 3 police officers were killed shortly after Chris Royal's death, and were all thought to be acts of reprisal for his slaying. A year later, May 14, 2006, the Jamaican Gleaner published an headline that read, "Cop killers still at large after a year," and this was even though the suspects had been named and identified by the police, even if it was only by their aliases, Nunu Puss, Harry Dog and Itis, all of West Kingston, wanted for the murders of Corporal Hewitt Chandler, District Constable Canute Brown, and Inspector Lascelles Walsh.